Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for shortening that bio. So appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And really was delighted to hear the previous panel that spoke, including my former boss, James Bass, a wealth of knowledge. I'm telling you, yeah, you can just soak whatever James is saying. And really, I think being part of really a lot of joy to have him. As mentioned, Caroline Mays, I'm with TxDOT. And a little unknown fact about me, I started my career in transit more than 20 something years ago in Rockland County, New York. So I spent my first couple of years in my career doing transit before moving to Atlanta after 9/11, and then went and worked for the MPO. We were talking about Michael Morris that you guys heard a lot. I've known Michael Morris probably my whole career. Great guy, very supportive of what I do at TxDOT. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Again, thank you, Joe and RailNation, for inviting me to be with you here on a Saturday. When I left home yesterday, I live in Dallas, my kids are like, Mom, you're going to a conference on a Saturday? Really? I'm like, yes. So again, just appreciate being here. So I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on what I'll cover today. And really, it's been fascinating. I'll talk about the plan that we're developing, but this whole conversation about passenger rail is giving me really a homework assignment. I'm doing a lot of research on the history of passenger rail in Texas. So I'll share with you some of that, which is fascinating because I'm telling people passenger rail is what really helped Texas grow. Everybody travel by passenger rail, and you see some of that this morning that will blow your mind. So what you all are talking about here today is not fantasy. It existed. Okay, it existed back then, and it'll blow your mind that it did. So it can be done again. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about some of the issues, trends, and challenges. You heard the previous panel kind of talk about those challenges, and then talk a lot about what our past efforts on passenger rail as TxDOT has been, and then some of the current efforts. You heard a little bit of that today. And then also what's exciting, I'll talk to you, Peter and I were talking about the first time ever TxDOT. We're in towards the tail end of developing the first ever statewide transit plan. TxDOT has never, state of Texas has never had a statewide transit plan that brings together rural, urban, everything, look at the entire state. So it's really exciting. And I think that'll be a foundation that all of you really, when you're looking at crafting your message, I'll urge you to look at that plan because it lays out kind of the business case for multimodal transit, whether it's passenger rail, light rail, commuter rail, buses, whatever, automated vehicles, some of the rural issues that was talked about here, opportunities with autonomous shuttles to be able to close that gap of the last mile. So there's a lot of exciting things. And then talk about kind of TxDOT's role. So I want you guys to look at this. This is just some things I've been able to grab from online. And the question I'm going to ask is this: what was the first operating railroad in Texas, and what year? Okay, try again. Let's start with the year. Let's start with the year. First operating railroad in Texas. It's in the 1800s. You were close. Yeah, 1853. And it was the Buffalo, Bayou, Brazos, and Colorado Railway. Yeah. I told you I'm doing research, and it's fascinating to really to really see that. So when you see these, this is what existed back then. So now let me kind of fast forward. So look at those maps carefully and study it a little bit. And I showed this a couple of weeks ago. look from, I think, yeah, 1908 is the first one. You see how dense the rail network was, okay? Then go to 1930, and you see it's even denser. So that was kind of very fascinating and interesting. It's like, okay, we actually build more rail, passenger rail. And then once you get to the 1950s, I can't see without my glasses. So let me, yeah, let me get on my laptop. But by the 1970s, you see what we have, barely anything left in Texas. And then 2025, you see that's all we have in the state of Texas, really, which is surprising. So a lot of conversation that was had earlier, this is where probably the 1930s is, or the 1970s, not really the 70s, but the 60s, et cetera, is where we want to go back to. What you see in 2025 pretty much doesn't cover anything. Okay, I live in Dallas. I've never taken Amtrak to Austin because it takes 6 hours. I could drive faster. I could fly in 30 minutes. I'm on Southwest and I get to Austin faster, or I can drive in 3.5 hours. I'm in Austin. Okay. I live north of Dallas. So I live in like Plano, Frisco area. I have to drive all the way to Fort Worth for about an hour and a half to go to the station and jump on the train. That would take another 6 hours. So I would have spent my whole day traveling. So I think James talked about earlier, reliability. Okay, reliability, frequency of service is really, really important to be able to allow people to take transit. And James also mentioned the 92% of Texans choose to drive. Would they choose to drive if the network was like the one in the 1930s? Would they choose to drive? So that's the question I'm posing to you guys. But today, are they choosing to drive? 2025, are Texans choosing to drive? No, that's the only option. I work for TxDOT. I'm a highway girl. Okay. I do this for a living every day. But that is not providing options for Texans, especially if you're trying to connect the regions, even within the cities, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, the service that exists. The DFW region is a little bit better, but the service that exists doesn't provide a lot of options for people to use transit. So I wanted to take you guys to that kind of memory lane. And then I want to also show you that was a map depiction, but this is now showing you kind of graphically how rail mileage or tracks changed in Texas. So you see the 1800s and then see where we are today with we've lost, okay? We've lost a lot of rail, abandoned, turned over to the freight railroads. Most of this that you see is, predominantly freight rail. That exists today, other than in the DFW area where DOT actually owns the transit, owns the rail, and the freight rail actually uses the passenger rail, which is kind of a very, very different phenomena. A lot of people, it's always the other way around, but the freight railroads gave up the tracks and transit took it over. So again, wanted to take you a little bit on the memory lane of history that what you all are fighting for existed before. So how can kind of re-rail Texas? That's going to be my how can we re-rail Texas? Okay, re-rail Texas, and that's really critical to all of what you guys are doing. And I found something also that, and I don't have it, but I'll find it later. The Texas legislators back in 1800s actually had a legislation that if you're going to build rail in Texas, you have to be incorporated in the state of Texas. So the legislators actually took some type of action in the 1800s to facilitate a rail, building rail in Texas. So again, very fascinating that the legislators actually were involved in rail somehow in the state of Texas back then. I showed this earlier. This is all the service we have today in Texas. So we have Heartland Flyer that was mentioned earlier, Sunset Limited and Texas Eagle. And you're looking at 19 Amtrak stations. And that, again, Amtrak is operating on freight railroad, okay? And the freight railroad today, the demand is so high. They're double stacking trains. The trains are longer because they just have so much demand. So guess who gets left on the sidewalk? Is the passenger rail. Hence, Amtrak, it takes so long for it to go from point A to point B. And then I love this because it shows you when you look at Texas and kind of the rest of where you can go by rail from Texas, that's where you can go. And that will probably take you a long time to get anywhere from Texas. So the density is not there, but also the coverage. And then one fact that I found that I forgot to mention earlier, in the 1970s, you could take a train from Washington, D.C. to Mexico City. Yes. Yeah. So we got rid of that in the 70s. So remember the map I showed you in the 70s, everything kind of disappeared. That was really the demise of a lot of the rail lines. So yeah, imagine from, taking, a rail from Washington, D.C. to Mexico City. So capital to capital. So that was interesting. And then when you look at, passenger ridership, we did well prior to the pandemic. You see 2015 and 2019, but then a little bit down in 2022, kind of the pandemic. And then, again, this was a national phenomenon for all of the transit network around the country. They really saw a drop in the ridership. Is getting back up now, but passenger rail in Texas, again, because of the coverage, not a lot of ridership, but that's still a good amount, okay? Think about how many cars are being taken off the road. Think about whose economic opportunity is being facilitated by this, because one thing I want to underscore, transit passenger rail is a huge economic opportunity for the state of Texas, or a huge loss, okay? Lost opportunity for the state of Texas. So there's two equations. Today, there's a lost opportunity because there's a lot of jobs and some of the employers can't find people to work because of transportation being a barrier. Imagine if you can take rail from here to Austin or vice versa, how many jobs would be filled for the skill sets that are in both of those cities? Just an example, okay? So that's where I think we have to think as Texans, what does that look like, okay? Transit passenger rail is not for poor people, is to create access to economic opportunity. If I have kids, I have a 21-year-old and 15-year-old twins, imagine if they finish school and I don't have to buy a third car or fourth car in my house and they could take transit. That's not the case. That's not the case. I grew up in a transit city. They never did, okay? Their transit today is Uber. If mom is not home, they're taking an Uber. So that's, I think, the challenge about how long can you take an Uber when you're a student to $11-hour job. Your money is going to be, eaten up by the Uber or Lyft costs. So those are the things that we're not looking at from economic standpoint. So I already kind of mentioned this, when you really see gradually passenger rail has kind of been diminishing in the state of Texas by the numbers. And then a lot of it was mentioned earlier, this competing kind of interest from the freight railroads, because passenger rail is at their mercy, okay? It's at their mercy. We don't control the right of way. We don't control the tracks. So that's really a big issue moving forward. But also when you look at population, okay? I was sure that 32 million people, okay? Dr. Porter shows we're going to 45 or even 50 million by 2050, 2060. How are we going to be able to move all of those folks? I mentioned I'm a highway girl. When I drive our highways, I'm like, I have no idea. Okay, if this is the only option we have, I have no idea how we're going to do this in 5 years, in 10 years, how we're going to move all of these folks. And you see people very frustrated on the highways because there's no options. And really the Texas Triangle, I'll show a little bit of stats. So this is the population. look at this and see what, and Dr. Porter has done 3 scenarios, a scenario where, A, B, C, and the hugest scenario is 50 million Texans by 2060. But even at the lowest, 36, 37 million Texans. And most of these Texans, by the way, guess where they live? They live in the Texas Triangle. 70 to 75% of that 32 million today live in the Texas Triangle. And that trend is not going to change. I could tell you right now. The fastest growing counties, the fastest growing cities, the fastest everything, including the companies that are being attracted. I tell people 5 years ago, we didn't have Tesla in Austin. Okay. And even here in San Antonio, there's a lot of companies, big ones, auto sector, that were not here 2 years ago. So right now we have more Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Texas than in California. So think about that, but they're all in the Texas Triangle. So when you have that confluence of companies and the people come where jobs are. So that's why you see our population is growing very fast, because there's a lot of jobs here. People are following those companies into Texas, or the ones that are expanding, they're following those companies into Texas. And that's what's creating kind of this confluence. It was mentioned earlier, a lot of these people coming from the coast. They're used to transit, but they come here and guess what? They may never have had a car, or they had one. Now they need 2, or they need 3 cars. So think about it. Dr. Porter always says, folks moving from other states to Texas move not just to buy a house, they move with cars. Sometimes when they get to, they actually acquire more cars. And he was saying that international migrations, a lot of those people are moving here, they're used to public transit. And then they get to Texas, there's no transit, and they buy more cars. So that's really part of the challenge we have, because there are no options, there are no choices. So again, want to show you this. Part of what James has been focusing on, and Peter and others, is how do we address mobility issues connecting the Texas Triangle. This, when we talk about economic engine of Texas, this is where it is. But we got West Texas with energy, we got border, we got ports. We have so many economic generators in the state of Texas that's creating a lot of this. So transit really has to be part of the toolbox that helps Texas address some of the issues. Okay, the clicker is not, Joe, it's not moving. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So again, inner city and regional connectivity, biggest challenge we have, because think about it. If you work in Austin, you live in San Antonio. Can you imagine you just get on the train and go to work and then come back? How many cars will be removed from that link? Okay. Or from Houston to Dallas, or Austin to Dallas. So if we can even address those, because those people are just going to work and then coming back home most of the time. But again, they're also mixing with school buses, students, mom taking kids to take. All of that is really confluencing what is happening on our highways, because we have limited inner city connectivity. And some of this was mentioned already in terms of challenges, and we are doing a lot of stakeholder engagement, and you can see funding was mentioned earlier. But I was telling somebody this morning, political will equals funding. When there's political will, funding is appropriated. Okay, so that it's kind of connected. Okay, TxDOT, we do what we're told by the legislators. We don't make decisions on funding. Thou shalt fund this, thou shalt do this. It's what we're execute. I tell people we're like the military. Yeah, your commander tells you what to do and you go and do it. And that's really what TxDOT does very well. But when you look at, some of these other issues, it was mentioned earlier, the low-hanging fruit, and I call it proof of concept. Okay, we all been talking about this for a long time. Where's the proof of concept that we can show that this can work and this will work? And I think we'll mention San Antonio, the stakeholders say San Antonio, Austin might be a good first step. must be that low hanging fruit. Not a very long corridor, but also very congested on the highway side. So you can really have a great proof of concept in a fairly shorter corridor, a big impact, and be able to show that, look, this could work. People that live in Austin could take the train to come to the Spurs game without having to drive. So think about that. Those opportunities are really, really important, to be able to address transit issues. Past efforts on passenger rail, I think people can study stuff. TxDOT, we can study stuff, and we've done a lot of studies, and we'll probably do more studies. Okay, we can do that. We're doing more studies. Rail plan. I'm not, I'm not touching the mic. Yeah, we do studies, and I'll mention the Texas Rail Plan is required by the feds, and we do that, and it covers both passenger and freight rail. So we do engage, and we do this religiously every couple of years. We're required to do that. But one that I'm excited to talk about later is this statewide transit plan that we're in the middle of almost finalizing it. Really, really very exciting. So that's why I mentioned we can do studies, we can do plans, we can engage, but it's just kind of that next level. How do you jump to that next step is, I think, where you all come in, to be able to jump to the next step. Switching gears a little bit, this is the national proposed network for passenger rail routes, and this is related to a lot of the corridor ID discussions you heard talked about later. And look at where Texas is. We're literally in the middle of this country, and we could have a bunch of connectivity going nationwide from Texas according to this plan. But again, it will take a lot to be able to get there. So you can see this. This is a very ambitious plan. I wanted to give this plan a name. If you all remember when Eisenhower came up with the interstate system, okay? Flashback and look at this. Could this be the rail, the Eisenhower rail, whoever it is, I don't know, give a name, that can make this happen? That is no longer an option, but it is a must. There's a sense of urgency for this nation and for Texans to be able to take rail. I travel a lot all over the world. Okay, when you all were mentioning, I travel a lot, and I go and I take trains. When I go to Europe, you don't drive. Okay, you're taking a train to wherever you're going and walking. So I get more steps when I go to Europe than being here. I was in Argentina about a year ago, and same thing. Argentina, they have passenger rail. They have extensive transit. I never took a Uber once. All I did was taking the train and the buses, and it was easy to do. So again, those are options that we can have. And now fast forwarding to what we're doing as TxDOT, some of the rail efforts, like you see here, the corridor IDs, we did get the DFW to Houston corridor ID, of course, overlapped with the NCT COG and Amtrak, and then Houston to San Antonio. We got that corridor ID, and then others that we're participating in, not necessarily directly. And then, of course, there's others that I mentioned. NCT COG, Marco Morris is participating in, and including a high-speed rail. We, as TxDOT, cannot necessarily get engaged directly in the high-speed rail, the Houston to Dallas, but we have some statutory roles that we employ. So here it gives you just a quick idea of what those corridors look like. So I'll start from your left. That's the I-35 corridor, okay, that James Bass talked about, that right now Judge Brown from Travis has really galvanized a lot of the judges from Denton all the way to here to really look at the I-35 corridor. How can we address it? and how can we move forward with, really looking at that corridor. We did not win the corridor ID, but we took it upon ourselves to actually do the analysis on that corridor. And I'll talk a little bit about all the others, then the San Antonio to Houston, and then, of course, the Dallas to Fort Worth. And this is the Texas Triangle I showed you earlier. That's really the focus that we are focusing on. And some of you have heard me talk about this. The challenge we have, even with executing that, is the governance structure, is the framework. Who will facilitate going to the next level? TxDOT will study it, but who will take it to the next level? And I think there lies the challenge, to be able to look at the governance structure. I lived in New York City. They had MTA that was more regional, looked at the broader scope. Other places, I grew up in Toronto, Canada. You had, a broader system that coordinated with all the others. Somebody talked about Via Rail. I grew up with Via Rail and others. So, and you look in the West Coast, San Francisco and others, they have a broader body that coordinates transit. We don't have that. We have TxDOT. And that's all I'll say. So specifically on the Austin to San Antonio corridor, right now, actually, TxDOT, we are conducting this rail study, passenger rail study. So we, as you look at the schedule, we're looking at March of next year to complete that. And you can see the components. We're looking at the infrastructure analysis. And again, this is just looking at existing UP line. We're looking at that infrastructure analysis, what can be done, what exists, is there opportunity to actually be able to run passenger rail. And then service options analysis, looking at, okay, what type of service would this look like? Is a service, high level service plan for the corridor, and then just the planning. What would it take? Okay, what would it take in terms of whether it's stations or other things that is needed? Was mentioned the cities and the counties. What would that look like, and how can that be planned in a much more comprehensive way? Because the connectivity to those stations is going to be key. And then the rail infrastructure project development, how we're going to really develop this. And right now is just the UP Railroad piece. But there's discussions we had with James looking at going to SH 130, much longer corridor. It's virgin territory, nothing exists. So that means it will be very, very expensive to do, but it could be feasible time-wise if the right-of-way is available. Actually, it will be probably faster and long-term, it will be much better option than trying to go on the existing UP line. But again, we're looking at this right now, and once we finish, the next step is really we're going to hand this to James Bass, and he's going to figure out the next step, because that's how far we as TxDOT can go. And that's why we mentioned earlier the Austin to San Antonio corridor could really, Peter, be the first proof of concept. There's willingness, there's a private sector interest in this corridor, and I think it could be done if there's the funding, political will. I think the stars are aligning very well in this corridor right now. There's momentum, and really, I think it could be one that the state can show, we can show that Texas transit and passenger rail can happen in Texas. So finally, just wanted to touch on the Texas statewide multimodal plan. Not sure any of you that have been involved. I know Peter and others have been involved. First ever, is very excited about it, and we're towards the tail end of it. But as you see here, really, it's a plan for Texas. Okay, TxDOT is shepherding it, but really we're looking at how do we make this a Texas plan. And there's a reason we want to do that, because it's not just TxDOT that can do this. It's going to take a collective effort to be able to execute on this. And as I mentioned, a lot of work has gone into it, and as you can see here, I want to touch on the key elements, as you see here, urban and rural transit services. One of the key things that came up was service level, frequency, where it goes, and often, and where coverage and connectivity. Because if you have carts, how does cart connect to Cap Metro? All of those are some of the issues we heard. But then also even within the rural and within the cities as well. Inner city regional connectivity, I can't stress that enough. That's again where I think the low hanging fruit is in terms of really showing that proof of concept. A lot of planning and design. It was mentioned earlier. Transit only works if there's density, if there's coordination with land use. Okay. And the land use, unfortunately, in Texas, this is not Boston, New York City, or Philadelphia, or Toronto. It's a little bit different. So it needs that rethinking of how do we rethink land use, whether you're in the rural or in the urban areas, and then how you design a passenger rail or transit system that really can be able to facilitate that. A lot of issues was talked about last mile connectivity. Right, a lot of options. Yes, you got the Ubers and the Lyfts and others, but also technology could be a key player. Okay, anybody from Austin? Have you taken the robo taxi, the Waymo? I have, and I love it. One, because I order it, it shows up. Now when I go to Austin, they just send it to me because they know, oh yeah, she rides it. I love it because it will show up. The driver's not there. The car is clean and literally like flawless, pretty much. Other than maybe, yeah, they're still, it's proof of concept. So again, that is a great proof of concept that they are trying to do. So think about it. If you're in a rural area, a veteran needs to go to the hospital. One bus driver with one van driving for 50 miles to go pick one person. Think about the cost. And if you can send that robot taxi or driverless car to pick them up, drop them there while they're at the doctor's appointment, goes pick somebody else, drops them there. So now you really cut the cost and you've also increased their mobility. You've increased their mobility. So if we're talking about mobility options, I think what I'm saying here is that we need to have all the tools at the table to really be able to address some of the issues we have. And then I already mentioned funding. And then I'll touch on this a little bit. So we kind of packaged the whole plan into these four components, and we looked at what are the needs associated with them. And then we looked at what are some of the draft strategies to really address them. I won't go through that, but I'll be happy to share the plan. I think we're getting it out for public comment soon. And you can be able to look at that and really provide us candid comments if there's anything we've missed. Because I think Peter mentioned right now, transit on the passenger rail, there's the FTA and there's FRA. And within TxDOT is actually two different divisions. So I have my public transit division doing this plan, and then the passenger rail is my rail division. So really being able to marry that. So I've kind of, through with my role, forced the two divisions that never talked to each other before. Okay. Now we're talking with this plan. You got rail integrated, all the multimodals integrated, including ferry. We actually have ferries, if in Texas. So all of that is integrated into this plan to really be able to package that. And then I mentioned we do plans and then we do more plans, but this one is actually a good one, taking some of these issues and challenges, concepts into really implementation framework. How do we move some of these things forward? This is the first time we're doing this plan. What are some of the things that we as TxDOT can shepherd as far as we can to really help all of you, the stakeholders throughout the state, to be able to address the issues? And then this is one that I push the team because we have a lot of transit systems, whether it's rural or urban, especially the buses. They're operating on the highways. We don't even have a statewide map that shows all of the transit systems together today, if you ask me. So we have to go to DART, we got to go to Houston Metro, we got to go to 77 transit agents in the state to see what routes they use for the buses. So this is one low-hanging fruit that we're going to do so that when we design any of the highways, we go on expanding it, we now say, okay, is this a transit route, a bus route? So then we can provide the right treatment in those corridors throughout the state. So what's our role? Long list here, okay? We can support. We can do studies other than high-speed rail, but we can do passenger rail study. We can do so many other things that, as you can see here, it's a long list and I won't go through it again. We can do a lot, but the challenge now becomes moving it into implementation. And the railroads I showed you guys earlier, none of that was run by TxDOT. None. So again, flash back to back then, none of those railroads were run by TxDOT. TxDOT was a player, and TxDOT will continue to be a player moving forward in terms of that. And this is my last slide. Just want to show you from where I sit. I'm the multimodal TxDOT person, and this is what I use. This is what I'm charged with at TxDOT. How does all of this fit together? So we got all of this stuff. Okay, whether it's airports, I'm over aviation. Whether it's rail, I'm over that. Whether it's maritime, the seaports, I'm over that. Whether it's border crossing, I'm over that. So highways, I'm over that. So I had to create this for my leadership, my executive leadership, to just show them this is what it takes for us to deliver in Texas, to improve mobility of people and goods in Texas. So we're not just looking one to the other. The challenge becomes federal, state, local structures, funding also impacts all of this. Okay, you can use this for this, you can't use this for that. So that's where a lot of the issues and challenges come. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions if I have time.
Thank you so much. I think we had time for 2. So I think for geographic reasons, I'm going to go to Lynn and then I'll go over to Andy.
I'm Lynn Aldridge from New Mexico. So I understand because of the population growth, your emphasis on the Texas Triangle. But El Paso's way out there in the western little corner, and it's a pretty big city. And there's a lot of traffic either by car or by bus between Las Cruces, New Mexico, and El Paso. My understanding is that many years ago, there was discussion about doing rail between El Paso and Las Cruces, but Texas didn't want to participate. Is that due to just because it's way out there and nobody cares about it, or because there are legal things that don't allow Texas to cooperate with another adjacent state?
So let me start with the last part. No, nothing prohibits us to coordinate with the other states because we're in the middle. We have New Mexico, we have Oklahoma, we have Arkansas, we have Louisiana. We collaborate with all of them on different things to think about hurricane coming through Louisiana, I-10, I-20. So we coordinate with all of the states and nothing prohibits that. The challenges I mentioned earlier, depending on what it is, because that would have to be TxDOT, okay? That would have to collaborate with New Mexico to do that. But again, if it's a study, we can talk a little bit later to be able to address that. You saw one of the lines I showed earlier on the Amtrak. It goes to El Paso. It serves El Paso. Yes, you're going to sit there. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so there's the bones. Okay, is the bones great? Absolutely not. But even across the border, there's a lot of people that commute across the border by bus. From in El Paso to Juarez, a lot of that, and all of our border crossings. So there's a lot of transit that we look at when we look at the border crossings. We look at people driving, people taking buses. There's no trains anymore across the border. It used to be. And then, of course, a lot of it is the freight and the trade component. Yeah.
Andy?
Yes, Andrew Sable. I'm from upstate New York, and actually I'm from the part of New York where Toronto is actually closer than New York City. I want to give you some good news. I was looking at the transportation statistics. I think you took them out of 2022. Well, you know what? Texas actually has received more Amtrak passengers, and actually in this century, in the 21st century, only 4 other years it was higher, and that was back around 2011 to 2014. Yeah. So I may make a suggestion. You may want to go to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics and update it, because I think that'd be a positive message that says Texans or visitors are taking Amtrak more than your statistics show. But anyways, just being in the rail advocacy, field for so many years. I'm being a civil engineer. As far as the Texas seems to me being a upstate New Yorker, they try, but they just haven't been able to get a dog in the game, if you will. Many they're doing it their own way. I understand that they're Texans, but my question is, maybe you may want to consult with other state DOTs. You have others in the South, like North Carolina, for example, or Virginia, which both of them have successful programs. They may be able to give you a few pointers. Not that you aren't doing something very good. I'm looking forward to what I've been hearing today, that San Antonio to Austin service. And I think that would be a great demonstration project for Texas DOT. And, that could be your, if you will, showing what Texans can do. So that's my comment.
No, thank you. Thank you for the comments. Like I said, I grew up in Toronto, lived in New York. And I've seen a lot of transit, and I've seen a lot of corridors as well. I used to cross the Tappan Zee Bridge every day to go to work. So you see, I know a lot of the East Coast. But to your comment about Amtrak, actually, I had a slide that shows the trend. I just did not include that here. It tells the story. If you still have 306 or 10,000 trips, that's still a lot. That's still taking a lot of vehicles from the road, but also providing mobility options for folks. It's not just about taking cars off the road, but it's providing the mobility options. And then in terms of what we can do, I mentioned the Austin San Antonio corridor. I could tell you right now, it would not be TxDOT executing it. Because to your point, the biggest challenge we have is the framework and the governance structure to deliver transit. Okay? At the state level or at a broader scale, that's the biggest challenge, and that has to be addressed. I mentioned all those rail lines I showed you. None of that was the state. None of that was TxDOT. There were entities that did that. And if we can just go back and look at how was that done, how were we able to deliver that much rail in the state of Texas back then, and where we're now, and look at that, is really, that's what's going to be the game changer. Even the Austin to San Antonio, there needs to be a governance structure other than TxDOT. Because I could tell you right now, I don't have anybody in my either rail division or public transit division that tomorrow, if I'm asked, put that person on the project, I don't have. Because you got to operate transit, you got to have worked as a transit person to be able to really do a lot of those things. And right now, we don't really have that capability within TxDOT.
Okay. Caroline, thank you so very, very much for being here. I think that was a terrific presentation, and I especially liked seeing kind of what's in the pipeline for Corridor ID. I think that's really terrific, and the fact that you were able to pick up where you did not get a Corridor ID grant, but you're just going to go ahead and push through. I think that's terrific, because one of the lessons that we've learned over the years is that those who are prepared when the next round of grants come around, they are the ones who get the award. You have to have your catcher's mitt on. So congratulations on that. I think that's terrific.